I want to welcome you to the Conscious Experience. My name is Boris, and today I am with Mike, my brother. How are you doing today? Are you grieving?
Unfortunately, I'm not, but I'll try my best to tap into this topic. How are you? Are you also grieving?
Well, actually, I am grieving. So we decided to kind of talk about this topic while it's alive and raw. Yesterday, my grandpa passed away. Um, he passed away exactly 6 months after my grandma passed away. So it's been a really powerful and transformational period in the lives of my family. This grandpa and grandma were like the patriarch and the matriarch of the family, the oldest, and now there's nobody in that rank anymore. So it's a generational shift. It's also, the people that raised me. And it's also this incredible space where I bet many of us in the last few years experienced this, where I couldn't be close to them during this, very special and sacred time of their life.
Oh, wow, crazy. Okay, I'm curious because I have questions about that as well. Like we didn't talk about it before this podcast, but let's just start with what is grief?
Yeah. Grief, I would say that grief is the process by which we let go. Some things are very easy to let go. Some things you can just like, ah, but sometimes when something is very integral to your sense of identity, things like family and people who you truly like deeply love, things that are, or people that are embedded in the fabric of your life, like people that raised you, people that you know, somehow in our childlike innocence. And I think in our spiritual reality, we have the sense that we'll be together forever in that sense, that these people that we love so much, how could they disappear? And I think grief is that process, the weather that we go through, the portal that we go through in letting go, in coming to essentially acceptance that this is a new configuration of life. And it's the adaptation to life, not as we used to know it, you know, things like birthdays, certain routines, like calling them, being on the call, like on Sundays, things like this. And then suddenly there's nobody there, adjusting to a new reality.
Mm, that
What
makes
would you
sense.
say?
Yeah, I would just summarize grief as losing something or someone that you love, and I think it's not what most people think, which is just like a state of sadness or pain.
Mm,
It's actually like a state of desire or wanting something that is out of reach now. So
yeah.
it's like reaching for something that you can't touch. It's like a phantom limb, like when something is part of you and then you lose it and you still think it's there.
It's so interesting that as you said that, I was actually thinking about that. I'm like, like just this moment of like reaching over for something and it's no longer there. And it's
Yeah.
like out of habit, out of like familiarity, out of expectation, you're like, oh, let me call my, oh, and
Mhm.
it's the like, it's the meeting of that world, that dream with reality.
Mhm.
And it's like it pops the bubble and you're like, oh, yeah, right. Like this now.
So because you just went through it or you are starting the process, what does grief feel like for you? And is it different for everybody?
I think grief is very unique journey for everybody. There are certainly these commonalities, right? And we have that kind of chart behind us, and we'll touch into the stages of grief. But I think that grieving is unique to each person in each situation. We may have a different experience of grieving when we lose our mother, or where we lose our dog, or we lose our grandparents. I've had experience grieving each one of these losses in my life. And I would have to say that each was completely different. Um, just to give you a snapshot, it's like I remember when my mom passed away, and also like where are we in our stages, in life. I was only 18 when she passed away, and I remember that was cataclysmic for me. Like my world was upside down. Like I went into this deep, dark rage, manic kind of depression experience, with a lot of substances to try to numb myself, a lot of like deeply unconscious patterns, trying to like party and like different things, just blind myself as much as possible, right? And that's the first stage, right? Denial. Um, Whereas, and then I remember losing my dog, and this was something really also dear to me. And I remember holding him in my hands as we were putting him to sleep, because he was so, he was suffering. And just, I remember the upheaval and like the incredible cleansing, like um almost like a waterfall of tears and snot and like everything in that moment. But it seemed like there in that one moment, it was just blasted through me. It didn't really keep, I didn't keep bouncing around the stages and things like this, or denying it. And now here, first my grandmother, and, now my grandpa. And it's like, it's completely different here again. It's just kind of like this soft, it's almost like when snow falls, right? And all of a sudden, like everything in the city becomes quiet because it's absorbing all the sound. And it's almost like this silent blanket. And I feel it, and the sun is still shining and the activities are going on, but there's this silent blanket in the background, and I can feel it, and I can hear the crisp footsteps kind of like the memory or the feeling or the presence.
Ooh, that's a crazy way to describe it. I think a lot of people can relate. And I think you're right. Not only is it your perspective, because you had talked about your relationship to the thing, whether it's your dog or your mom or your grandparents, but also the way that they die. So there's so many different factors, right? Like somebody dying of old age versus somebody getting murdered. Like you're probably not going to go through, and you're probably going to skip straight to anger if somebody's murdered. Or so there's so many different ways now. How long do you think grief lasts typically? And does it end?
I had the incredible experience of going through training as a hospice volunteer several years ago back in Vancouver. And this was a really big part of our training, to think about grief, to connect with this space that, of course, everybody is kind of going through, because grief doesn't even start necessarily when the person dies or when there is the completion of the loss. Many times it starts before that. It's kind of like a pre-grieving, when the loss can be anticipated, such as old age, things like this, or sickness. There is a grief that starts even beforehand. To be honest, I have to say that looking at some of the people in my life, and also throughout my own experience, I can say that some people never complete grieving. Sometimes grieving never gets to be fully felt. And so it remains a kind of a lack of acceptance that this really happened, and the lack of really being able to open back up to life in a real and full way, where you're like, I get it. I see it. I see that there was a gift. I see still the perfection of life. I am open. I'm receptive. I'm available. Sometimes we never get there.
Yeah, I heard once that you don't really move past grief, you move through it. And even though you move through it, it stays, that memory stays with you, just like good memories stay with you for your entire life. Like the most amazing memories stay with you. So yeah, I've heard that grief never really ends, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So when you lose somebody, it's always that part of you.
I want to also explore this. Yeah, I think like on the one hand, there is the memory. The memory is, of course, there. But I got to say that, looking back in through my experiences, it's not like I don't remember my mom passing away or the pain, but there is a transmutation that does happen. There is an alchemical process by which, and this is a process really that unfolds as we ascend in consciousness. It's a process of kind of seeing that actually everything belongs. And it doesn't mean that, that I was wrong in crying and feeling like, God, how could you take my mom, for example? But it's like, it suddenly has its place. It has its, value, right? Like, for example, now looking back at that time, that was such a pivotal moment in my life. It illuminated for me spirituality, enlightenment. It started my whole journey of seeking for the truth. It started my love and appreciation for meditation and healing modalities. And it's like, that was my initiation, that moment, that loss, and I've even had this like almost like mystical like communion experience with my mom of really feeling like she initiated me, like really feeling the gift that she was actually, not on this personality level, not on this character level, but on that greater archetypal level where we are, I believe, all together on the backstage, watching, witnessing how our characters are playing out. I felt that it is her gift to me. I felt that it is not so much a sacrifice, but like a gift, an initiation, an invitation to a bigger life. That how could I have known it if I had my pacifier still with me, so to speak? If I didn't have to face this earth shattering for me, world shattering, paradigm shattering experience.
Nice. Going back to the question of how do you feel when you're going through grief? Would you say that all of your experiences were essentially related to heartbreak? Because we recently did an episode on heartbreak, which is essentially the feeling of losing something that impermanently, or the feeling of impermanence.
Heartbreak is usually the feeling of losing something permanently.
Or sorry, permanent.
Right? It's like you don't, yeah, impermanent loss. Oh, I'm heartbroken. No, I really feel like heartbreak is a big part of grief. And I guess like if we were considering the stages, I would put it somewhere around like sadness. It's the place where you are no longer in shock. You're no longer denying it. You're no longer angry or feeling guilty. You're no longer bargaining with life and trying to like negotiate some kind of a exchange, but it just comes to it's before acceptance. And it doesn't mean, again, sometimes we get to acceptance and then we go back to the other ones, but then it's like there's this place where it's like, you got me. I have no more cards to play. I have no more games to play. And it's like you let the arrow go through your heart, and it's like it's already has gone, but you kept on pretending that it hasn't, and you finally look down and you finally feel it. It reminds me of also, like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience of having an injury and not seeing it. Like maybe you were playing or whatever is going on, you're really involved in something, and then you look down and you're like, and then it hits you all of a sudden. Like I remember one day I was super young, and my friend, she had like a butter knife, and then I'm like, can I have the knife? And I took it, and she's like, no. And she pulled it, and somehow it cut me. And I didn't even notice. And I'm like, what? No, let me. And I look down, and then there's like blood is pouring out all over my arm. And then it hits me. So it's almost kind of like that. I just feel like it's the awareness of finally saying, okay, it's the giving up. I think it is like that initial stages of surrender. And that feels like that heartbreak. But I do feel like with grief, it is, there's more to that portal. There's more to that journey than only that moment.
It's literally every emotion in this grief process. What are the 5 stages? Let's go through the 5 stages of grief. This was, I think, made popular by somebody known as Kübler-Ross.
Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, she brought such incredible insight to the whole process of death. I'm excited to get to know it more. But in our episode on death, we talked about the Tibetan Book of Dying and things like this. And I really believe her work is like right next to that in her depth of like compassion and understanding and empathy and feeling through every process of it. So yeah, beautiful. Let's go over them.
Sure. I just want to say, I bet you when our relationship with death changes, if it ever does culturally, and you can again watch that episode where we talk about different cultures and their relationship with death, I guarantee you this whole stages of dying or stages of grief become more like stages of joy, which is like a different understanding of what both of these relate to, right? Grief and celebration of death basically are 2 completely different things. Grief is more on like, the negative kind of sad side that most people see as Like when
Yeah.
most people think grief, it's like, I don't want to feel grief. It's all these fucking all the worst emotions.
Yeah. And I mean, an alternative perspective that I would offer is that they are both, included. It's just that right now we do not really see the celebration part of this. We don't really see the graduation, the honoring. And I think that a lot of this has to do with how people die, like how today people die. Because most of the time, like even death that's anticipated is shrouded in this, in fear, in keeping a person alive in this like zombie like state and skeleton
Well,
like
just in a
state.
hospital. It's not even their home.
Yeah,
It's
in
like
a
not even
hospital,
outside. Yeah.
bare walls that smell of like chlorine or whatever they use, the cleaning agents, and it's just like this. It's
It's yeah, gross.
it's just this. Yeah, it's the entirely the opposite of family love, coziness, like that sense of like we're in it together. Let's journey, family. Let's journey, brothers and sisters. Like let's do this together. I think that because that honoring is missing, we do not really get to experience truly the co-joy. I have to say, in this case with my grandpa, he has had dementia for like a couple of years. And literally, like after my grandma passed away, it's almost like he let go also, but his body kept staying here. And so he was in such a state of like vegetation, basically, like not really engaged with life, not knowing who he is, not recognizing his sons, his grandsons, not like really being even able to interact with life, and it's like, and he ended up, of course, in like the hospital and different things. And it's just like it's the lead up process, I think, that um I want to just kind of like come back here because I was talking about celebration. What we were saying is like this person, like he's ready to go. There's no reason keeping him. There's no reason that he would want to stay. And it's like, and to some degree in me, and even with my wife, we were talking about it. Like we were yesterday celebrating him, his release, his completion, because he was like, what was it? It was just ongoing suffering, right? But at the same time, there's this great awareness. So it's like, yes, it's even just like, think about when children, grow up to a certain point, right? And then they leave home for college or they leave home for their new life. And that is a celebratory event, but there is also grief in that event. It's called the empty nest syndrome, even, right? It's recognized in psychology as like, yeah, there is this amazingness. And then you look back at your empty nest and you're like, hey, son, oh, he's not here anymore, right? So I do feel like these two aspects of like grief and the pain and the sadness and heartbreak and the experience of like a new life being born, a new paradigm, a new experience of how this world is going to be from now on. They're both here. I think they both belong.
Yeah, I think this quote feels relevant. Queen Elizabeth said, grief is the price we pay for love.
I could see. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
anytime we love something, it's natural that time to take that away from us, or we will leave that. And so grief is just like the price we pay. Now, Queen Elizabeth passing, quite significant. You had mentioned like old paradigms kind of falling away, like your grandparents' generation being completely gone. So like amazing when we look at like the world and seeing when we say old paradigms dying, we're like grateful for it because we want new paradigms to form, right? But when it's somebody close to us, it's like, ooh, the microcosm is where all the feeling is. And
Well, think about this also. We did a quick search earlier, right? And like I mentioned to you that like between 2003 and now, the graph for like people searching about grief has been like this climbing graph. It would have been a good investment, right? But what's happening now is like the entire world has actually gone from like 2020, like a world ended, like a paradigm for everybody ended. And yeah, there's this grief and adjustment. I really feel like for the most part, we are going through grief. Perhaps for the most part, we're just going through denial and shock still, for these first like 2 years. And some mixed in anger and guilt and bargaining and all of this and sadness, but yeah, the price we pay for love, but it's almost like the price we pay also for familiarity, for like this sense of home, and then losing home. And I want to also offer for perhaps, this idea that our entire life here is almost like a grieving process for having left heaven, right? For having left the oneness, right? And then it's like we're here, something of us is still aware of that, right? In this longing way, right? Not that part which is always and already there, but there's this longing part and this whole, Rumi-esque aspect of being here on earth and seeking home.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to put it. We end up with acceptance that we're all just humans and we're not really all powerful as God. It's very humbling.
Yeah. So let's run through the stages, right? So like stage one.
I was going to ask if you think those are relevant. So you want to describe them, right?
Yeah, I think that they're very relevant.
Well, they're relevant, but also we have to, again, preface this with everybody goes through the stages differently and everybody takes different times going through that. And that really depends on your relationship or your closeness in proximity through space and time with what you think you lost, and then how far that thing is away from you that you keep grasping towards. So yeah, let's go through them.
And on the other hand, it's completely an inner world experience. Like it's just you in your inner world of thoughts, beliefs, expectations, familiarities, habits. And so it's like you're always right directly in touch with it. The stages, I think, again, like these are not necessarily stages as in like step 1, step 2. These are much more like, watch, this kind of thing is going to emerge. And how do we meet it skillfully? How do we meet it with truth, right? And so like stage 1, and it doesn't have to be, it's not like, usually it's in the beginning, but it's going to come back around many times. And that's denial and shock. Perhaps shock is always at the start because you're just like, but then denial is the space where it's like, it's essentially what we've talked about all throughout this channel, like this experience of suppressing, of developing sanskaras, where developing these karmic bonds to the experience, because instead of letting it run through you and run through you and have a complete emotion, complete experience, we often feel like, oh, it's still, I'm grieving, like, oh, I'm still sad. No, I'm not. I want to get on with my life. I want to play. I want to party. I want to be creative. Why is this stuck to me? Let me just ignore it. Let me like have a drink. Let me have a smoke. Let me have something that just, and that is, let's talk about like, how do we meet that moment with compassion and with truth?
I think you have to be present. And like you said, the biggest part of like that denial thing is like doing compulsive behaviors, like over functioning, or like meaning like you're watching more than you're consuming more than you need. You're taking drugs or alcohol, whatever it is. That's the main one for this. I'd like to also talk about like anger, how like we will start withdrawing from other relationships typically, and like trying to find,
So you mentioned like presence, which is really important. Presence, and also like just developing the consciousness of knowing that whatever you're not willing to feel in this moment, it doesn't just disappear. Like the true nature of our emotional experience is that they are in us. I still would hold this space that the grief and the sadness, it is in us all along. It's like, I don't think we're absent-minded on the level of our like higher and deeper self. We know that every experience is temporary. Every relationship is going to pass away. Yes, we have this blinder on and we have this denial on. Yeah, my dad's going to be here forever. Yeah, my mom's going to be here. And then because we have this blinder, it hits us so suddenly. But I think that blinder doesn't actually blind the greater awareness that we are. And so that is actually also what makes life so precious, and each moment so precious, and each relationship so valuable. And we have it against this contrast that we're going to lose it. This is temporary. It's not here forever. And so that, I think, emotion and experience is already in us. And then it finally happens. And that's the portal to let it out. So what I'm speaking about here is holding the consciousness that this is a healing process. This is a gift for you. You are going through an alchemical process that's going to enlighten you, make you feel actually lighter, make you feel more complete and more whole if you avail yourself to it. So knowing this, if we can really hold to this consciousness, and it doesn't really make sense. Yes, you can taper it. Maybe you can say, oh, okay, I can't take it anymore. I need a little distraction. But you are still holding this consciousness of, I'm going through it. I'm not going to try to go around it, bypass it, or ignore it. Yeah, I just wanted to add that part about the denial.
No, that's really good. It's almost like this is like a snake eating itself. And like the solution to denial is acceptance, which you can kind of see. It's like, because I was just saying, like, if we were to take these as stages, literally, let's just assume that for now, a lot of people don't get past the denial stage. They might live their whole life with no, it's not forgiveness is not the word I'm looking for, but it's like this ability to accept, right?
Yeah.
Accept what happened.
I've seen people in my own family where it's just like that experience happened with mom, and it's like, no, this should not happen. Like, and the people became more closed, more tight, more, unavailable. So definitely, I think it's actually very common that we don't complete the experience. We don't even start to grieve. We just like, even culturally, I have to say, like coming from like Russian culture, it's like, I don't know if it's just like years of this experience of hardship where people are like, instead of really crying their hardship out and grieving this, it's like, let's have some vodka, let's have some drinks. And that is the culture of like, oh, something, somebody died, let's bust out the vodka. Let's remember the good times about them. Let's remember the good memories. Let's, drink to their memory. And it is all this sham to not feel the excruciating pain and loss and the gaping hole in your heart.
Yeah, drinking alcohol could amplify the anger and depression stages, but maybe not help the negotiation or acceptance.
So let's take a look. Yeah. So then like this anger kicks in, and anger is often also mixed in with guilt, like guilt for, like, I can definitely see it in myself, guilt for not being there, guilt for not being able to spend more time, guilt for not having said like the best thing. I keep thinking about like, see my thoughts going to like, what's the last thing I said to him? Like, was it meaningful? Did we really connect? Like, does he know that did he feel that I love him? Did he,
do you know what's a big one that I was researching? The guilt for, let's say, your grandma when her husband passed away. So there's an inherent guilt that why didn't I pass away? Which is such a weird one. It's like, why wasn't I taken first? And living with that, because that's not anything even intellectual or personal. Like, why would you want to like die before that? But we have that kind of guilt. Yeah,
I think that guilt also sometimes happens to children. Like to children, like very like aptly like snap into it. Is like, oh, dad left, must be because of me, or like, so and I
or think a child dying, right? A child dying and you feeling like, what the hell? They were supposed to live longer than I was.
Yeah. And I can see that, from my grandparents on my mom's side who are still alive, and witnessing their child pass away at almost like our age now. Like, she passed away, she was 38, just a little bit younger, older than us. So yeah, I think it's it's something. So then, the anger and the guilt, I think they go very much hand in hand. Instead of feeling the guilt, we often project it out as anger. So it's like, there is that we feel in the background. Oh, I could feel it, especially back when my grandma passed away. It was like this, like, oh, how could people be dying in these hospitals? How could it just be this like cold, heartless, stupid process? Right. But the real space is like, how come I wasn't there with her? How come I couldn't be, like, what the hell is, that? So that's another really big one. And I think it's important again here to presence this. We're going through anger. So it's like, what do we do to go through anger? We feel it. We allow it to move through us. Sometimes it's about finding safe ways to express anger. Sometimes it's like biting a pillow and yelling at it. Sometimes it's like punching a pillow. Sometimes it's just like just like burning in it, laying back and just feeling that. And then we'll feel that as we burn it, it's like precipitates into guilt, into sadness, into acceptance, then back to anger, things like this.
Not to go completely off topic, but a lot of people feel angry towards God. Because why? Because they don't understand death, why God would include death. And this is mostly the Judeo-Christian religions where it's like death is bad, and so
it's kind of like, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. There's a lot of confusion, I think, because again, in the Judeo-Christian religions, at the same time as that, what you mentioned, there's also this assumption that if you were a good Jew, good Muslim, good Christian, then you're going to heaven. So then you're literally, this was the whole point of your life. So why aren't we celebrating or what? So there is this, lack of clarity. And it's also very interesting in the whole idea of death being ordained by God. It's also really interesting because on the one side it's bad. On the other hand, did God make it? Or is he just allowing it? Or, what is all of that?
Well, that's the question most children get stumped on. That's why I brought it up. Again, I talk about religion to a lot of people, and it's like, I see the ones that were raised Judeo-Christian, just they don't understand death. It's not explained to them thoroughly in church. But you're right. It's like at church, they do recite people's names that have just passed away, at least in the Catholic churches. I don't know about other churches, but
yeah, all that I've seen. Yeah. Including even mosques and things like this. Yeah. It's an area of human experience that has been kind of like tabooed due to essentially a lack of understanding. It's like we don't talk about death. I remember, like, especially a few years back, to bring up the subject. It's like, hey, how would you, want your experience to be like when you die? Oh, why do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, my mom still says that. Mom, if you're watching.
Right. And it's just a part of that consciousness where it's like it's taboo, it's blotted out, and we pretend that it's not here, but it is literally here every day of every moment of our experience. So I think that a lot of these distortions and pains and misunderstandings, confusions, these breaks from reality and from love and from all of this occur because we don't have the context to hold death. We don't have the societal even structure to say, hey, yeah, it's part of our life. Let's start like right with birth and death, and like let's really explore this because it's happening every moment. How can we bring it more into acceptance? Because then there is where I see it's like what you offered in the beginning. It's becoming more of a celebration because it's happening every day. Like we're learning to grieve every day. We're learning to celebrate every day. It's like this full spectrum of life, from 0 to whatever the 100% experience is. But now we very much live in this like hopeful false idea that like, oh, we'll never die and let's not talk about it, or we'll figure it out later.
Okay, so we're let's say we're angry with God because we don't understand death, and next, because it slapped us in the face and we have to move on, next step is negotiating. So it's like, okay, maybe you're right, God, there's death. Now what are you negotiating?
Well,
what do people typically negotiate?
Yeah, it's more like bargaining. It's bargaining, believing that you can do something to change reality. So you just start to feel like, you lose the meaning of life, and you're like, what's the meaning anymore? God, like, why did you take my mom away? What if I did something different back then? Maybe she would still be here. It's more that kind of bargaining. It's more that kind of negotiating with realities. Like, give me back my thing, whatever my loss is, and let me have it. I'll do anything. It's that kind of a space.
Ooh, I think most people would want, the only thing they would want is time. They probably just want more time with that person.
More time with that person. I mean, it's in many times of grief, I would say, like, I don't ever want to be without that person, not in a sense of like, yeah, of course you don't want the person glued right here, but you want to have the ability. I like what you said, I think in our death episode, it's like, to be able to contact them, to be able to be with them, to know that,
to be able to snap your finger and you pick the time that you have left with them. We want that control, but we don't have that.
yeah. But even, would you like really choose like a spot where like, okay, you know what, now mom dies,
No,
it's
that's
like,
what I was saying. That's what I was asking you in that episode. It's like, you said you wouldn't snap it and live forever, even if we were all healthy, which we discussed why we wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that either. But we would snap our finger to extend it. But we don't know how much we would want to extend it, nor would we want to be the person to be the devil guy that takes away people.
yeah, right,
The Grim
right.
Reaper.
Yeah. And so what we're left with here as human beings, without this full awareness, is like this bargaining process, this sense of like, what could I have done differently? Why me? Why did it happen? Why is it? And I remember for me, this was a really big one when mom passed away, the anger at God and the space of like, why me? What, like it just fucked up my whole life. Why? You know? And that's the space. The why space is not the space of actually feeling and grieving and letting it complete itself. It is also another one of those stoppers. It's like, instead of feeling down here, we are popping up here and we are playing mental games.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. So have we thoroughly gone through negotiation? I think we touched on that quite a bit. Should we move on?
Yeah.
So the next one's big. Yeah. Depression. So this is probably one of the heaviest feelings in all of this.
Yeah. I think this is like the most intense, deep sadness, where it's like,
the negotiating didn't work, or what? Or it worked a little bit?
Negotiating, it never works, because you cannot change the past. And that's what it's attempting to do. It's attempting to reestablish control, but is impossible, right? It is always a folly.
Do you think that's why it leads to depression? Depression is kind of like this feeling of like lack of any control.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think so. It's like you finally accept that you literally cannot do a thing. You can't bring it back. You can't change the way you feel. You can't, outwit it in any way. And then it hits you. It's like you finally look down, you see you're bleeding, and it's gone in. The arrow's gone in now. And it's like, wow. And then all you got at that moment is just to bleed,
And this is a beautiful space. This is like you're saying, I'm picturing somebody who's like going through the stages of grief, and then this final one's like, and then all the blood starts coming out. It's like that is the emptiness, which is why I say it's beautiful, but it's the emptiness. We're not yet at the full, or at least half full emptiness. We're just empty, which is why we get depressed.
Yeah. It is not the one where you're aware of oneness. It is the one where you're aware of aloneness. So it's like, that's it. I'm alone. It's lost. It's gone. And now I get the whole tsunami of all that I was unwilling to feel at any of the other stages. All that was underneath denial, all that was underneath anger, all that was underneath my attempt to bargain with God. It finally hits me.
Awesome. And right before we go to the last stage, let's actually rewind and go through all 4 stages real quick, rapid fire. Like, let's go. What is something somebody has said to you maybe in each one of these stages that would be slightly different to help somebody along the way that's going through grief? And then maybe what's something that they probably shouldn't say? And they might be quite similar for all of these. So let's just go through real quick.
That's great. Yeah, let's explore it. Yeah, let's work at this together. So I would say, at the stages of denial, the thing not to say is,
it didn't happen.
Yeah, the thing not to say is, it
doesn't matter.
Is to basically be compliant in that like space of denial. I would just like I think the thing to do is to really be with the person, understand where they're going, and through your presence of being aware of them, it's almost like they know that they have it's almost like that. Remember that's shaving the mustache off the mirror. Like they know they're wearing the mustache of grief, but they're pretending they're not. But you being present with them, in them saying, it doesn't matter. Let's just have a drink. And you're just like, I hear you, brother. I'm with you. Yeah. Let's have a drink. And, but you are there in that awareness. And I think that over time, that is like a really gentle space to, there'll be a moment when you're in that presence and you will see, because we don't stay in one stage. We are going to go and you're going to see when they, and you're going to meet them there. And that will help them to go past that denial and to actually deeply feel. And sometimes it's also like to share, like, hey, share your own experience if you have one, of saying, yeah, I remember that first moment. It's really hard to even look at it. I get it.
Beautiful. Let's move on. Anger. So now somebody's upset.
Yeah, somebody's frustrated and feeling all of the kind of rejection feelings of what's happened. Yeah. I would like, the thing that I think that we can do the best to help somebody move through these stages, is to like affirm the stages, normalize them, like to just say like, yeah, wow. And they're like, I just can't believe this stupid hospital system and like all of this and the way that we're doing this. And you know, instead of like, the thing not to do is to shut their anger up, is to say, oh, you know what, yeah, it's all gonna, it's gonna get better, and she's in a better place, and like blah 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 blah. Like all of that is what not to do. And instead, it's like you want to actually help them to feel what there is to feel, because we know that all feelings are limited, so they are not eternal. So whatever a pocket of feeling there is, help them to feel it by just like being in empathy. Like, yeah, I would be freaking furious also to have to die like that. And just let reflection, I think reflection and like being with the person.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I like the way you're putting this. It's literally your presence, and then if you can help them speed up the feeling of that emotion. So if it's anger, you first of all be present with them, and then second, you can say, this is temporary, this feeling is temporary, you can go release it by hitting something, and again, it eventually will exhaust itself. Same with denial, which is mostly like a chatter in our heads, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, sweet. I don't know if we need to go. It seems quite similar, all these themes, so we probably don't need to.
I would say, yeah, the whole of it, like whether it's bargaining or sadness, depression, it's essentially like you don't want to, which is what I gotta again say, like our culture has been brought up in the space of like deny and close people's emotions because we are not comfortable with our own emotions. So we try to stop other people from feeling it. And, I really can resonate still. Like I can imagine my friends who are more in that kind of a space, they would like put their arm around me and say, hey man, let's forget about it. Let's go, have some fun. Let's go, have a drink. Let's just release this for a little bit. That kind of an idea. I would say that, there's also perhaps a time and place for that. Like sometimes this is, I think, important point. Sometimes we get so caught up in our stage. Like I've seen people like be in like sadness and they're just like, and they can't come out of it. It's almost like, and they're not really anymore feeling it. It's more just like they're in this cycle and they're stuck and and nothing is happening. So sometimes you need to, help you. One of the ways you would help them is to reshock, like break the cycle. Right. And sometimes that could be like, hey, let's go catch a movie together, to help to pace the emotion. But for the most part, we really want to just like help them to move through it by feeling it, maybe even with them in that like empathic space.
Yeah, you're right. That's so common that's a form of distracting, right? Even though it might seem very innocent and like night, like let's go to watch a movie or let's go hang out and take our mind off this. Yes, it has its place, but again, we're not moving through what we're moving past, right? So this is good. Before, let's actually just describe acceptance real quick, and then I have two questions for you that are quite relevant since you're going through it.
Yeah. So I think acceptance is that moment where it's like, we would call it more of the complete experience. And it doesn't mean that it will never come back again, but there is this present cycle or this layer is completed. And so you have felt the sadness. It's kind of like, in a micro moment, I'm sure we can all relate to this experience of crying, and then it stops, right? And then, then it's still some sadness, and then suddenly there arises a thought about something else, like what am I going to eat? Or what would I like, and then you start thinking about like the weekend, or you start thinking about a work project. Usually when I'm aware of this shift taking place, I see, oh, okay, I'm complete. I'm complete for now. Like now the energy has been liberated, and now it is exploring other things. So I will just say, okay, thank you, for going through this. And so I think that on a macro scale, and we will have these micro moments, and then on a macro scale, it will eventually complete all of that. And it will be like this sense of like, okay, great. And you start to become more aware now of the things that you love, because when we're depressed, we no longer really do the things we really enjoy. But now more creativity starts to emerge, more sense of like future, and not only the past, right? But throughout all of these stages, they're very steeped in the past. And now for the first time, we will start to notice that there's thoughts more of optimism, of creativity, of wanting to engage with life. And that would be acceptance, that the energy returns back to you to use for creativity. But we have to also say here that, yeah, with the caveat that there'll be maybe another movie, a song, a moment in nature, or watching another couple or a person that reminds you of someone, or having a picture come up on your memories on Facebook, and it will, boom, open you up again. And you may have a micro cycle or a longer cycle. Yeah. So it could be like this even for years down the line.
Beautiful. I love everything that you recap there. And yeah, I love the micro and the macro, and the fact that it's not complete it's not just like this one way lane where it's like a circle that completes itself. It's like we're so complex as people that it can happen in every moment, which is interesting that it's like God sends ripples, and these ripples keep coming. I had something to say there around that before I ask you the next question. Let me see if it comes to me. Yeah, it's almost like what we're accepting is essentially the phantom limbs, and this only happens through time, right? So it's like time has to play out, and it's not time through one cycle, it's like time through awareness that this might come over and over again. But these phantom limbs are now disappearing, and we're becoming familiar with essentially death, or the spaciousness that is all around us at all times. So yeah, you're accepting basically the fact that nothing here is permanent ever.
Yeah. And I mean, let's also say that this is a natural way where I really feel like our sadhana is our life. It's this experience where these life moments, which are built into the experience of being a human being, if you're conscious of them, you realize that every day you're living in this temple. You are in your spiritual practice. You are on the journey of ascension, regardless of what you're doing. And these moments, when you complete these cycles, this is teaching you this incredible wisdom. Like, really think back to the Buddha's teachings, that if you only could understand impermanence, like that is enlightenment in itself. You start to like all of the craving, all of the aversion, like it's completely steeped in the idea that there is something permanent that I can grasp, or that I can like push away. And if we know like everything is a snowflake, it's, this thing I'm trying to push, it's going to touch my hand, and it's just going to melt in my palm, then what am I doing? Where would I find that energy to fight or to push? So I really believe that this is, in another form, this is grace, and this is the Holy Spirit. This is that sweetness that is leading us through life, and opening us ever more to the realization of the truth, which is our perfect nature, our eternal nature, and not what this world would kind of make of us, so to speak.
Awesome. Why don't we end with this question? So, knowing everything that you said, intellectually, you're still obviously going through this process yourself. Can you, because I know a lot of people are looking for this, like over 400,000 people per month are looking for grief on YouTube. And so what they're coming across are these 5 stages typically. So we've done a pretty good job at explaining them. We've also told you that they're going to happen over and over again at multiple times, potentially. So can you pinpoint where you are currently at, just having it happened a day ago, and maybe describe that? And then also knowing, like, because obviously your family is affected, where certain people you think are at. Again, you don't have to shout out names or anything, and how you are, if any, feeling responsible for helping them through this grieving process.
Yeah,
So
it's just
basically, your situation ship with everything.
yeah, the current situation. Um, I think because this was a uh, pre-grieved experience with my grandpa passing, it's like everybody knew that he's not going to, get better, you know.
For how long?
Uh, well, at the very least, from 6 months ago when my grandma passed away.
Mm.
So I really could feel a lot more like that shock and denial and anger with my grandma. Here, I feel like it's been a lot more down right to the sadness because like she opened the portal, and for the past 6 months, like kind of been going through that, through the different stages, bouncing around. And so with this one, with my grandpa, I really feel like, even when I see my dad and, I really feel, and my uncle, I just feel like I don't see any fight left in us. It's more like, yeah. And we are just letting it rock us. It's almost like, my family has been more seasoned somehow to death, starting back from when my mom passed away. That was the first culture shock, quote unquote, that really broke the taboo. And, now we had to talk about it. Now we had to feel through it. So I think that at this moment, I would say that, everybody that I can think about is like between sadness and acceptance, but not the acceptance that's really the completion of this, but like it happened and we see the bleeding that's happening in our hearts. Um, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So with the premeditated understanding that yeah, this person's gonna pass, because that's a lot of families, I'm sure. Um, I would say that they would probably agree with that. And so you're saying that they basically not bypass, but there's no need for the denial anger, which makes sense. How about the negotiation? Because that's the last stage that you kind of pass before you move into sadness. So with preemptiveness, do you think anybody, and I know it's a very personal question, you don't have to list names, but do you think anybody is negotiating that was affected? Because since her partner did pass away, and that's typically the person that would probably negotiate most.
Yeah. Well, if you think about, somebody passing away who has dementia, who's literally like, not present anymore in mind to begin with, there was also like stages where he no longer really interacted with anybody. He would still like, say things or like sing or something like that, but he was not available. So I think a lot of that got to be felt earlier. And the bargaining, yeah, like the only bargaining that I can see, that would even in my own mind is like, why couldn't it have been different? Like, why couldn't we, like, he was all the way out in Germany, right? Why couldn't we live together? Why it would have been so different if we somehow found a way that we could all be together, that they wouldn't be there on the other side of the world. What if I could, be there and help them with all the technology, all of the knowledge, all of the, nutrition and everything like I want to give, you know, but I knew, I mean, I already tried even on back when they were alive. And it's so hard from so far to have like really an influence where there's all kinds of other doctors and things telling them, do this, eat this pharmaceutical, blah, 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 blah. So I think that, yeah, I could still feel like some bargaining in that sense of like, I don't want this to be the case for anybody.
Yeah, it sounds like regret, and that's the reason that I bring that up is because yeah, I didn't know you would actually have a response to that, but it sounds like again, these are not stages that we move past. We move through, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and it's not right or wrong. It's this beautiful mechanism, and I think yeah, everybody in the family would think that. It's like, why didn't I have more time with them? What could I have done with the time? Right? It's like the top 10 regrets on our deathbed is one of those always. So
Mm.
yeah, is there anything that you feel like you can do to help anybody that's because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will know somebody that's going through grief, maybe even, and they want to help out. So is this something you should be actively reaching out to or just watching for? Do you recommend reaching out to everybody that was affected and saying, hey, I'm here for you, we're all going through this? Like what would you recommend for people to support the people around them?
I just say being on the receiving end, like what I would say, like has been super sweet is just people calling or messaging, just saying like, hey, like I heard this happen. Like I just want you to know I love you. I'm with you. And I had my little brother call the other day, and it's like, what can you do? You can't, as a human, do anything, right? Like you can't help them to stop feeling this way, or, complete their grieving process, or even bring the person back. You can't do anything. This is not a doing, or a salvation of doing. It's more like you're feeling it, and I'm feeling it with you. I'm with you. I love you. I remember you. That has been like the sweetest thing. It's not like, as somebody who's grieving, that I need like, some kind of talk to, or like, try to cheer me up or something like this. None of that I think would ever feel good. But it would be much more of this kind of like, just like a hand on the shoulder, kind of, even if you're not really there, but through sending a message or an email or a call, a voice note, that kind of a space. I think just because there is nothing, not trying to do something, but it's just kind of like, wow, I feel love, and I'm so grateful. It helps to feel more through to the oneness of, that emptiness.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you're listening to this and you're looking for a clear answer of how long does it last, when does it end, all of that, we have really no answer for you. But maybe we can end with this, though. I don't know if this will spur anything that we haven't talked about, but why do you think some people move through grief faster than others? And
I
again,
think it's willingness.
independent of like how they died or your relationship to them.
Yeah. I think I think the core space would be willingness, like willingness to feel, and the consciousness that still very few of us really have developed, of like understanding that everything that tugs at our emotions is here to liberate us in a very literal sense. They will take that weight out of us. They will complete a karmic cycle. So if we have this understanding, then we have more of a willingness. We have more of a buy-in to the process. We brought this example up before, like imagine being on an operating table and you suddenly come to, and these people are cutting you and like trying to, you start fighting them, right? And it's like, you don't have the awareness of what's going on. They're trying to save your life, right? So it's that kind of a space where we finally realize that life is friendly, that we are being led, that our higher self has every one of our experiences, so to speak, like predetermined, set up for us for our liberation. Then I feel like we can move faster, but not because we want to move faster, but just because we are an open faucet, versus one that is like trying to twist and turn itself not to let out what's inside.
Beautiful. Well, Boris, I am here for you. If you ever need to grieve, we can grieve together.
Thank you, brother.
Maybe I'll end with 2 quotes, see if this touches anybody's hearts. So this is by an unknown author. I always love these unknown authors. I feel like it was the person who wrote this website. Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. And so that to me says like love, which is what is the price we pay for grief, leaves a memory that literally cannot be gone. So it's like we had said, does it ever end? I don't think it ever ends. I think you have a piece of that forever, which is beautiful in its own way. This one says, life is eternal, love is immortal, and death is only a horizon. And a horizon is nothing save the limit of our sight. So yeah, we can't really see. Potent. Yeah. Death is a horizon, and yeah, we can't see it all.
Yeah. It reminds me for some reason of the song Calling All Angels. It's a very like grieving song.
Nice.
And in it, it's like, it's talking about us as humans, like we're trying, we're hoping, but we don't quite know how it goes. And I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
This,
we don't see it. Could you imagine like if somebody died and you could see like just like imagine like a Harry Potter world where like their like magic glimmer escaped their body and like seeped into the side of your souls or into your heart forever, into everybody's that they've ever touched hearts, and we could see that and just confirmation of something that we should be celebrating. Yeah.
yeah. Or even if they would come back like Jesus and be like, hey, you know, I'm all right. It's okay. Don't worry.
Goodbye.
I'll see you on the other side. It's cool.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is life and death. This is why we're here. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. Thank you so much, Boris. And
Thank you,
my
brother.
heart is with you always. And we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Take care.